Hello, it's Blue Orange 22. So I'd like to do a reaction video. Earlier today, I was on the Majority Report with Sam Seder, and it did not go very well. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Majority Report is a daily YouTube show. They're very leftist, very progressive, very liberal, and they are pro-feminist and very much against the men's rights movement. So I called in today to debate about men's rights and what the men's rights movement means. And I have to be honest, I don't want to be negative, but I don't want to be dishonest. Sam, I find, is extremely unprofessional and disingenuous and manipulative in the way that he debates his guests. I put a link down to the show below. I'm going to break down some of the things that I wanted to say but couldn't say because I was constantly interrupted. And that was basically what happened in the show. Is he would ask me a complicated question about a social issue, and I would start giving an answer, and I'd be interrupted after a sentence or two, and I'd never be able to finish my answer. So we're going to get to that in a little bit, and I'm going to show you what some of my answers were or would have been. But just a quick FYI, interrupting someone doesn't mean you win the argument. Like, if you interrupt someone when they're answering your question, that doesn't mean their answer is wrong. It just means you're not letting them talk. And that's pretty much what happens for most of this video. It started out okay for the first few minutes. I could tell there was an instant hostility as soon as I said I was a men's rights activist, but at least they did let me speak. Even though Sam did say he thought MRAs are lunatics, at least he was being honest. That's an honest answer, so credit for that. But it very quickly started to dissolve. It started to dissolve when he asked me about what do I think the issue of men's rights are. And I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but I was explaining how there's an empathy gap where people are less empathetic to men's issues. And then Sam asked me, well, what is the link between an empathy gap against men, which he actually agreed with. I talked about studies that show people are less empathetic towards men being in pain, and Sam did say, okay, there may be merit to that. But he asked me, what is the link between people having less empathy for men and boys and actual legal rights? So I started answering about how in some countries there are higher pension ages for men. Sam immediately interrupted me there. And he said something very hypocritical as well, because in the same paragraph he said he doesn't want to hear about pension ages in some random country, and he just wants to talk about the United States. But then he also made the point to say, well, don't you think that there's women's issues all around the world? So on one hand, he said we're only talking about the United States. On the other hand, in the same paragraph, he brought up the entire world as an example. But that was just one thing to note. But my answer wasn't finished, because what I was going to say with the pension age issue is that the fact that countries and societies have different pension ages for men, and it's so rarely discussed, shows the empathy gap manifesting itself under law. That you could have blatant discrimination under law, and people just accept it. And there are MRAs who protest it, but for the most part, people in these countries accept these laws because these laws still exist. People still vote for the governments that start these laws. And it took years for the conversation of pension ages to even happen. And I didn't want to get stuck on just pension ages. There was a whole list of discriminatory laws I was going to talk about. Different healthcare laws, different domestic violence laws in different countries. The way in India, rape victims aren't recognized under law. And I was going to say that these examples of legal discrimination are a manifestation of the empathy gap. But I was never allowed to say that because I was cut off. And now again, I've linked the video down below with some timestamps. At around an hour and 50 minutes or so, we got into a debate over what masculinity is. And he kept pushing me to answer, what is masculinity? What is masculinity? And he said, well, you're calling yourself a men's rights activist and you don't even know what masculinity is? I think that's an absolutely ridiculous question. And I started answering, well, I think the definition of masculinity are the social norms and expectations society have for men. And he immediately interrupted saying, see, it's a social construct or something along those lines. But again, he interrupted my answer. My answer wasn't finished. I was going on to say the second half of that sentence, which would have completely changed the answer. My full answer would have been, I think the definition of masculinity is the social standards placed upon men, but personally, I don't think there should be any one definition of masculinity. I don't think you really can have any one definition of masculinity because I think it's evolved over time and it's still evolving now. And it's different in different parts of the world, different cultures, different religions, different countries, different eras in history. So you really can't just say this is the definition of masculinity, which is what I wanted to say and which is where I was going, but was never allowed to because I was just talked over and interrupted. And I'm also not ignoring the two women who are on the show today. There was Emma, who is a co-host of the Majority Report, and there was a guest, Nomi. I'm mostly addressing Sam in this video because A, it is his show. It's called the Majority Report with Sam. And B, he was doing most of the talking, which is why this video is mostly directed towards him. But I gotta be honest, I would kind of accuse all three of them of the behavior and interrupting that I'm talking about. And there was a rather silly accusation of sexism at the end. Nomi accused me of being sexist because I was so sick of how this debate was going. Because I like to have, good faith, quality, intellectual discussions, which this was not. So I said, listen, Sam, let's do a one-on-one debate. And I don't mind debating three people at the same time, but having three people just yelling and interrupting at the same time is not something that I want to do. And she perceived that as me being sexist because, I don't want to talk to the women. It's like, no, the reason why I'm choosing Sam specifically is because it's called the Majority Report with Sam Seder, not the Majority Report with Nomi. Now, around an hour and 47 minutes, and again, I put this all below the timestamps, we had a really weird exchange about prostate cancer that got into all these weird topics about childbirth and stuff that had nothing to do with it. But basically, I was making the argument of how prostate cancer isn't covered under Obamacare. And Sam was saying, well, it is covered under Medicaid when you hit the age of 65. And I was saying, yeah, but a 55-year-old can still get prostate cancer and die. And Sam was saying, yeah, but there's a difference between possibility and likelihood. And these laws are based on the likelihood of someone getting cancer. And a 55-year-old is less likely to get cancer than a 65-year-old. So that's why the law is the way that it is. But that makes absolutely no sense because what he's essentially saying is because a 55-year-old is less likely to get cancer, they don't need to have protection coverage for cancer in their insurance plan. So a 55-year-old gets cancer, they go to the doctor and they say, well, you're 55, and because statistically you're not supposed to have this cancer yet, your insurance won't cover it. There's essentially the logic behind that. Where my argument is, it doesn't matter if someone has a 1% chance of getting cancer or a 50% chance of getting cancer or a 99% chance of getting cancer. Shouldn't everybody's insurance cover them in the event that they get cancer? So I found that was a very disingenuous argument. Sam acted like I didn't know the difference between likelihood and possibility because I said, what's the difference between likelihood and possibility? I understand the difference between the two terms. What I'm saying is, what is the difference between having a 10% chance or 1% chance of getting cancer? Insurance should cover you either way in the event of getting cancer. And just one quick side note, and really I could go on with this. I mean, you can watch it. I put it below. It was a mess, and that's just really not the kind of debate that I like to have. And that's just, to me, it's just nonsense, And I was watching all the comments in the chat and the live stream, saying, "Oh, I'm being intellectually owned." In my opinion, interrupting someone's answer and not listening to them is not intellectually owning them. I prefer conversations where two people or three people or four people or whatever are actually enjoying the discourse with each other, and they're not out to try and get each other, and it's not a sense of hostility against each other, and it's not about who's better at interrupting, who's better at a gotcha, who's better at cutting you off and twisting your words around, but it's people that actually want to listen to each other and learn from each other, and maybe they disagree with each other, but they're still appreciating each other's points of view. Vaush, is it? And Warren Farrell did a debate. And Vaush is very anti-man's rights activist. But I really enjoyed that debate because I saw two people who were having an honest conversation, and they were listening to each other, and they were enjoying the discourse. They were enjoying talking to each other. They weren't trying to make it a competition. It was a debate, but it wasn't a competition. And what it felt like to me on the Sam show today is the second I said I was an MRA, it was like instantly a battle. It was instantly, how can we get this guy? How can we make this guy look bad? How can we prove this guy wrong? It was a contest instead of a dialogue, which to me is just not what I like to do. And I was hoping for better than that. To me, that's what I think is a more intelligent way of going about a debate. But that's just me. But just a quick side note, something I brought up in the talk was how MRA groups often get messages from 13, 14, 15-year-old boys who are scared of the stuff they see going around. They're scared of stuff that they hear at school, that they see on social media, and some people I saw were questioning, well, how come these kids are talking to you guys, meaning MRAs, how come they're talking to strangers on the internet instead of their parents? That's a very good question. Why do you think 13, 14, 15-year-olds are emailing people like random strangers on the internet rather than talking to their parents? If you're a parent, and I've done videos on this before, if you're a parent and you're concerned about your son getting sucked into the alt-right or the men's rights movement, maybe you should ask yourself, what kind of environment do you think that I have with my son? Like if your son went up to you and said, Mom, Dad, I want to talk to you about something. I've been reading a lot about men's rights and feminism, and it's not that I'm like sexist, it's not that I don't like girls or anything, but I just feel that men's rights activists make some good points and that feminists do some stuff that I disagree with. What would your reaction to that be? Like, would you instantly clamp down hard, or would you have a discussion with them? Because there's a reason why I think so many kids are afraid to talk to their teachers or their parents, and instead, where do they go? They go on communities online because it's the only place where they feel that they'll be actually listened to. And the Sam Seder show, to me, was an example of people not listening. So that's my honest opinions. And he gave me honesty when he said that he thought MRAs were lunatics. I appreciate that honesty. So I'm just going to return the favor. He said he wanted to come on this channel. He's welcome. So is Emma. So is Nomi. And if he wants to have me back on his show, I'll come back. But what I'm not going to do is a repeat of what happened earlier today. So if it's going to be the same kind of dynamic, then I'm just going to end it and I'm just going to leave. Because that is not, to me, how a debate should look. That's not an intelligent way to debate. That's not what I do, and I'm not going to do it again. So if you guys are watching this and you want to come on or you want to have me on, fine. But I want to have a real conversation, not a contest. So anyway, thanks for watching.